You are listening to the Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent Talk.
Well, happy Monday evening, folks. This is Scotty Roberts. You're listening to the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com, where you can hear this show in audio format, see all the outlets where it plays, as well as terrestrial stations, and find out all the goodness that is Odyssey Radio. And also, you can join this broadcast in a simulcast with the audio over on my YouTube channel in video, and that would be youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. You can join all the other Intrepids over there who come in and banter, and not only that, there's a lot of things that go on in that chat room that is live alongside the show, and something that's come to my attention is that there's a real family that's formed over there. And there are some people that reach out and help other people in need over there. And that's really, to say it's heartwarming sounds cliche, but it's something that I think is really a wonderful thing that happens over there. So I want to thank all of you for joining me tonight, and all of you that have become unofficially an Intrepid and come on over and join the family. If you haven't joined yet, come on over to the YouTube channel. And you can hear this broadcast on Odyssey One, Odyssey Radio Network, and you can watch the simulcast at the same time and chat in the chat room. Thanks, everybody, for being there. Means a lot to me. Now, I want us to kind of launch right away. I could get into current events and talk about stuff. It's going to be an interesting week in politics. I'll comment on politics if I think it's necessary coming up during this week. If the current event overwhelms me, you might hear me say a little something about government, civics, the politics that are being played right now in our government. There's so much crap out there in general that starts to get me very, how would you say it? You can't say anything anymore without being attacked by somebody. Because there are all different kinds of points of view. And what has happened is good debate has turned into attack. That's how passionate people are, emotively driven people are, and sometimes, frankly, how stupid people are. I read some things out there that are so ridiculously stupid because they come from such a pointedly one-side view of how the world works that it becomes ridiculous to try to talk about it or address anybody about it, especially in social media. Social media has become less social and more antisocial. It's a place where I can put up a post that has nothing to do with politics, and yet somebody will want to come in and lay down their politics in my post, or use a post to morph it into something political. And that starts to get really old. And I try to shut some of that down. Some of it I'll respond and say, yeah, well, that's okay that you think that way. But what do you think about the post I just made about African tigers or whatever? So are there African tigers? I don't even know. Tigers, do you find them in Africa? I think lions, jaguar, cheetahs. Tigers. Where do tigers come from? I think of India more than anything else. But who cares? I'm not talking about felines in the wild world tonight. So all of that stuff goes on around us. Hopefully you can come here and listen to some things that are controversial, that stirs people to think, I really hope, that stirs people to talk about these things, stirs people to take a look at what's really going on inside their spirituality, inside their faith life, inside the things that they choose to believe. Now, belief doesn't really require a lot of fact to back it up. Should I say faith doesn't require a lot of things to back it up. Faith can operate in full view of facts that contradict it because that's what people choose to believe. And so challenge yourself to say the things I choose to believe are those things that are based on truth, on fact, on understanding what really exists out there. And that's all I've asked from the beginning of this particular line of thinking that we've been in and teaching and pondering and espousing over the last several weeks. And so I'm going to pick up with that whole idea of, it started off with, as you all know, asking, can Christianity and paganism be blended? Is there such a thing as an authentic Christo-pagan? And that morphed into, very quickly, why do you believe the things that you choose to believe or say that you believe? And then the questions get asked. If something controverts that thing you choose to believe, and I mean controverts it to the point where you can do your own research, your own study, and you find out, wow, wait a minute, maybe the things I believe have some historical fact that shed it in a totally different light. But does that cause you then to want to make a change? Does it cause you to want to dig deeper and find there's got to be something that backs up what I believe a little better than this? And the problem is, like in Western Christianity, it got its start, as we know, of course, in the Middle East. It got its start for the first 200 to 300 years with totally different set of beliefs than it has now. And what was behind that was the push by the Orthodox Church. And then out of the Orthodox Church, what did you get? You got punishment for not believing the way they believe. You got labeled a heretic or a blasphemer. The Inquisition rose out of that. And I'm speaking in very vague generalities here. What happened with the Orthodox Church was they found that if something didn't really establish what they said was so and started to accept was so, there was persecution involved. There was banning of material. There was burning of scrolls and books. There was destruction and persecution of those who did not believe the way the Orthodox Church believed. So all of this is what we've been covering. And it all comes down to really looking at this whole thing of this kind of interfaith, interspirituality. Interspirituality, what does it do? It expresses the fundamental truth that the universe is interconnected. It's interdependent on each other. Everything in the universe is all interlocked and interdependent. And all of the cosmos is simply one system, and that all religions share in it. And since the one system underlies all of being, all that is, all of life, all of reality is in the one system of the universe. Humanity is connected in its shared experience of physical life, and also in its deeper relations to multidimensional, non-physical levels of being. So while this has always been true, many people are just now expanding into a place where they can see it to be true. And they're looking for ways to express this truth in their own spirituality, in their own relationships with others. Is this, on a totally different route, is this the stuff that the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy in the book of Timothy? Beware teachers that come up who teach falsehoods. They teach things to tickle their own ears, and they abandon the truth. Is this what this is all about? Is there a truth underlying in the historical mythology / literal, the literalness of the history of what we believe? Is there truth buried in there? Is there truth in the literal acceptance of the divinity of Jesus? Is it not just a symbol? And so we all have these questions that start to plague us because we're looking for the interconnectivity, yet all we were taught through Abrahamic religions, through Judaism, all the way up through Christianity, was that there's one God. And you are unique if you believe in that one God. You are to be the standout in the rest of the world. You are to be the one that condemns the way the world thinks. Even if it looks good, and it's not good, really, especially according to Christianity now. And that opens the door for the persecutions we've seen, for the atrocities we've seen. Would Jesus go out of his way to make sure his followers condemned, burned the books, and killed the opposition thought? People who thought differently or saw him differently or experienced him differently. So the constructed nature of many systems and structures becomes more clear to people as their spiritual capacity expands. Now, is that the stuff of Satan? Is that what are we on the evil side of the equation when we say there's more to this than what Christianity teaches? And this whole appreciating of differences, this whole observing several points of view at one time, and while still sensing that there can be a unity or an interdependency that underlies the whole. Now, this ability can lead to a genuine practice of interspirituality. But without it, interspiritual development may not even be possible. And I'm only saying this to use it as an example, can a Baptist that might condemn everybody else who doesn't see the world as they filter it through the Bible, are they promoting any kind of interspirituality? No. They're promoting a singularity of themselves, of what they believe, and everything else is for the hell-bound sinner. And since a true interspirituality might depend on a person's developmental unfolding, if you will, we have to look at patterns of personal and spiritual development as part of the what's inside stuff that makes interspirituality work for many people. And so this is going to be a look at the internal landscape of all of this stuff, of blending these things together. And personal development is the first thing I want to look at. We've already kind of explored the nature of interspiritual or blended paths and the important roles of belief. Everything you believe is important, and I'm not attempting to dissuade you from believing what you believe. I'm asking you to make sure what you believe has a solid foundation, that it has a solid history, that you can verify that. This is where I've said faith to me in something that is unseen is very difficult. Unseen, unexperienced, untested, untried. For me, faith in something that was written over 2,000 years ago and prior to that, and yet no new revelation has come since then. The Baptist Church even taught me that the revelation ended with the time of Jesus. The revelation of God's only Son. So what do you do? Again, that question. Why do you believe what you believe if you find that throughout the centuries things have been changed? We saw in all the things we talked about that beliefs tend to group together to form systems, which act as templates for behavior and external structures, such as the institutions we have, the churches we have, the different forms of government we have even. We examine the outer landscape of paganism and Christianity to better understand their origins, their forms, their practices. And now I want to move us into shifting our attention away from the structure and the beliefs of two different religions and to look instead at what's internal to their practitioners. Let me ask you, wherever you stand on the scale, what you believe, how is that internalized with you? There's the question you have to ask yourself. How is it internalized? If it's internalized, meaning how does it affect your heart, which affects your mind, which affects your actions and everything you do? So we have to consider what's required internally in order to see the religious landscape with interspiritual eyes. And of course, maybe this is where we have to sit back for a second and say, is it important to have an interspirituality? Is it important to understand that things are supposed to interconnect? And on a certain level, we have to ask, are they supposed to interconnect? Are there things that are supposed to be good, things that are supposed to be evil? Are there many forms of good, but only one is the right, true path of good? As even the Bible told us, and we were taught this when I was growing up in the Baptist church and in Baptist college and Baptist seminary, that there's that verse that says, all our righteousnesses are as filthy, leprous rags in the eyes of God. So all the things that we consider good are the thing that God says, there is no good in you. You have a sin nature. The only good you have is what I bring to you, what I gift you with by grace. And all you have to do is accept it, because everything good that you can do is, he uses the word picture, a filthy, leprous rag, which is the rags the lepers would cover their sores with, and the pussy yuckiness of that disease. And so it was told that, you think you're righteous? That's fine. All your righteousnesses are like filthy, leprous rags in the eyes of God. Therefore, you have to rely on God's word. You have to rely on what you're taught. There was also that idea that there's nothing good that we can do to gain salvation. If we could, and the reasoning was this, if we could gain salvation by our own works and our own deeds, then what efficacy was the death of Jesus on the cross? Why did he have to die for sins? Why did he have to go to hell, descend to hell, and resurrect again? That was the question we were posed. If you can do it yourself, if you can get to heaven on your own merits, if you can please God on your own merits, then why was there the need for God to send his Son? That's the reasoning that we were taught. And so why do some people seem to have these interspiritual eyes? And where do they come from? And other people don't. One answer is found in research relating to personal faith and development. In this research, social scientists studied hundreds of people from different age groups in order to understand the skills and the values they exhibit. And in order to map the sequence in which they exhibit them, researchers have discovered that there's a whole variety of developmental patterns that cover areas as diverse as motor skills to cognitive reasoning, to moral span, to value clusters, to types of faith relationships. These developmental patterns appear to emerge in an order that's repeated over and over and over again. And each developmental capacity brings with it a way of seeing the world and a set of beliefs or values that support this new way of seeing. Something racing through my head right now is Greta Thunberg. Not to get into that too deeply, but she's the young, troubled teenager who was able to speak in front of the UN and issued her "How dare you?" continue, all with the view of environmentalism as she understood it. And with all the different controversial sciences that are put in. Truth from both sides, exaggeration from both sides, perhaps. But at the same time, we look at her and you look at the firestorm that raises over her, the criticism that comes from looking at what she does, the looking at every little thing she does. Oh, look, she's eating out of single-use plastic containers. How is that supporting her version of environmentalism? It's not. But people are going to look at that stuff and criticize it. And so this is all part of this development we're talking about, the way we establish, the way we see things, and the way we discuss things. Same in politics. Do you support Trump? Do you support his impeachment? Do you support the people who drove the impeachment? Do you find them reprehensible? Same for the other side of the equation. All of these things come from this kind of development of our values. And so seeing the world and this set of beliefs or values that support the way we see it is what we're going to be talking about. We tend to believe that understanding the developmental process is going to help us recognize the where and the why of interspiritual eyes. Imagine these things I just mentioned, 2 examples, Thunberg and impeachment. Take those things. Where would you stand on these things if your interspirituality is honed? If you view the world with interspiritual eyes? Some people might say, well, then you would have better compassion and you would find out that the president is a jerk, really in real life, and you could never support him. Or some people might say the opposite. Some people might say he does this and this despite the fact we don't like everything he does. So you look at these things and say, what circumstances would your interspiritual eyes govern? How would they exhibit themselves out there if you blend your spirituality rather than have a singular spirituality in opposition to everything else? So, something I found it's done for me as I start to seek that interspirituality, I can still have my strong opinions about things, but I am not so condemning. Where some people have looked at, say, Adam Schiff, and they really degrade him because he's a liar. He makes up stories. He's pushing something you might not believe in. And I find him kind of a vile person. That's my take on him. But at the same time, I have to bring up the question, is he a man who loves his wife? Does he love his children? Does he love his family? Are there good qualities about this man? But he is also trapped in his own political point of view, his own non-interspiritual point of view. What governs the way he thinks? The same thing for the people on the other side of that equation. So you got to look at this stuff. Now we got about a minute left here, so let me wrap up this first half right now. So we have to examine the sequences of development that are observed in human beings according to 2 models of personal development. And in the following information we're going to get into in the next segment, we're going to talk about the perspective of faith development, and we're also going to talk about how concepts themselves expand and contract so that they're capable of supporting various worldviews with an interspiritual perspective. All right? So think about where you are on this stuff. We're going to go out for 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Hang on. just down there. If you hear snoring, that's where it's coming from. He's pretty good at it. He's got some good sleep apnea going on over there. And you're, of course, back with my show. I'm Scotty Roberts. This is the Intrepid radio program right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. And then come on over to the video live stream over on my YouTube channel, which simulcasts with this audio on the radio, Daddy-O. And that's over at Mr. Scotty Roberts over on YouTube. And join the other Intrepheads. And, there was something I was going to play for you this morning, and I couldn't get it lined up. I tried to dig for it a little bit, and getting it to play on this, maybe we'll do this tomorrow. There was something that really impressed me. I'm going to talk about it for just a minute here. One of the powerhouse stations here on the radio. We listen to it all the time when I drive the kids to school in the morning, and there's a certain morning team that's on there, Crisco, Des, and Ryan on KS95. If any of you local to the Twin Cities are familiar with them. Well, every year at Christmas time, they do the Cloud Choir at the Mall of America. And I don't have all my facts in front of me. That's why I'm not going to show this to you today, but I'm going to try to find a video to put up during the show tomorrow and show you what this is. See if I have the right to do that on YouTube. And on the radio, I think is just fine. But this Cloud Choir, there was a song written. I don't even know the actual title of the song. I don't know if it's Clouds or what it is. But it was of a few years ago, a young man in his teens, I believe it was, who knew he was dying. He was diagnosed with terminal illness. And he wrote a song about his passing. And the opening lines said something like, "If I only had a little more time." And he's talking to his loved ones and his family. And he's talking about going to the clouds, this up, 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 he says, into the clouds. And the time is getting close, the time is drawing nigh. And he ends it with, "If I only had a little more time." And every year for the last few years, this radio station and this morning team has been behind gathering a impromptu choir in the rotunda at the Mall of America. And they did that this last Friday. Now, I wasn't there, but we were listening on the drive into school with the kids earlier today that they had over 8,500 people that joined for this. And they played the sound clip from their own video from this. And it was tear-jerking, only in the sense that it brings to your mind the brevity of life. What would you say if you knew you had mere weeks or days or hours left to live? The countdown was there, so to speak. And this young teen wrote a song about it. And he said, if only I had a little more time, I could tell you. It was basically not a regretful song. It was a song that said, if I had a little more time, basically, I could tell you more about how much I love you. And it's a very moving song. And tomorrow I'm going to see if I can have the video for this, because I don't think I can pull it up into the show right now, impromptu. I thought about it while I was driving, then the whole day has gone by, and I didn't think about it again until just now. So we'll see if we can get that going for tomorrow, because I think it's worth listening to. It's worth retelling the story, and they do this every year, and it gets bigger every year. They've now made a movie about this, of course. I don't know what network, but I think they said it plays actors like Neve Campbell. I don't know who she plays in it. They named off some other actors, some I didn't recognize. And they were also there at the recording of this Cloud Choir on Friday night at the Mall of America. And so it's strong stuff to think about. I know in the Baptist church, we were trained to say, well, Was this kid a born-again Christian? If not, it's too bad that all this effort into this is being spent in that he went to hell and everybody around him went to hell because they did not become a born-again Christian. And that, to me, it cuts. It's a travesty to think that way. And those were some of the things I heard as I was in the church that made me want to question, is this really what is so? And I understand the logic behind it in the Christian church. If Jesus is the Son of God, and if he is divine, and if he did die for the sins of mankind, predicated on the fact that man is innately sinful and evil, and hell-bound, and only a faith in Jesus would save you, I understand why they can say things like that. And I started rejecting that as the truth when I said there's more to this than that. And then you look into it and you find the things that we've discovered in this series, historically, about what the church used to believe about the divinity of Jesus and so on, compared to what they turned into in later centuries. So I only brought that up because it was on my mind, on my heart. It was very moving. It's very touching. I was just listening to a very uplifting song. And so maybe ask yourself, no matter what you're thinking, if you're grappling with your mortality, if you are perhaps grappling with wanting to be here, if you have troubles in your life, if you really don't know what's going on with your life. I mentioned yesterday in our live broadcast, which, by the way, I have to apologize, it's disappeared. I don't know why. Some snafu on YouTube, for some reason, it says it updated, but then it says it's not there. I can't find it anywhere. It's for those of you who want to go back and listen. So ask yourself, I don't want to get too maudlin with this, but ask yourself, what if I knew I had a very short time on this earth? Do I live my life as if it could be gone tomorrow? What are those irreplaceable moments of time that we have? If we look back at our last argument with the people we love, our loved ones, does it matter what that topic was? If you knew you were going to be gone tomorrow, would that have been an important argument to have? Your kids, if you turn them down, no, Daddy doesn't want to play Go Fish tonight. I'm tired. I said that to my own child last night. I just want to sit down. I don't want to play Go Fish. Please, Daddy, play Go Fish with it. Okay. So I played Go Fish, and we didn't even play by the rules, but it was there. And my kids needed that time. And so you ask yourself, those irreplaceable moments of time, we become aware of those when we become aware of our mortality and of the brevity of life. What was it, Solomon that said, life is like the grass? It withers and fades. Or like the flower that blooms at sunrise and fades by sunset. So think about those things. Think about your own spirituality, your own faith, your own... Let's leave it at spirituality. What would it mean to you if those around you knew that you were going to be gone tomorrow? Or next week? Or next month? Do we live our lives really with a care to what would the people around me do without me? Would they grieve? Would they dance a jig? Would I leave unfinished business with them? What would be my regrets because I didn't look to the irreplaceable moments of time in my life? So, food for thought. And that song, when I heard it on the radio this morning about the Cloud Choir, they called it at the Mall of America, to celebrate this kid's life, and passing, it made me think about those things afresh. So I'll see if I can get it up to play tomorrow and share that with you again. Let's move back on, because we left off before the break talking about, and we basically got what? It's about 15 minutes left. So let's look at growth as an expansion in capacity. All right? Growth as an expansion in capacity. And this is all toward this interspirituality. When we speak of personal growth, and we've all done it, I'm personally growing. God's still working on me. You know, we hear all these phrases. I'm still growing. What does growth and development really mean to you? Is it a catchphrase? Is it a cliche? And by this, what I'm talking about is the process of the expansion of human capacities on both the physical and the cognitive levels. You know, cognitive it's the awareness, the awakeness, if you will. Not woke. It's awake. It's being awake. So as motor development unfolds, an individual can be more and do more, beginning with the wiggling of fingers and toes in a crib. We're talking the way back. To crawling, to standing, to walking, to running. And each of these motor skills requires the expansion into a greater capacity. Your skill sets expand into greater capacities. I look at my 8-year-old daughter, very much into gymnastics, standing on the arm of the sofa, doing the splits in the air with one foot way up over her head and twirling around. I'm like, don't do that on the furniture. Do that on the ground with a pad on the floor. But I remember when she wiggled her toes and fingers for the first time. So you look at that stuff, and our bodies are set to have this capacity to expand into greater things. And that broadens the horizon of what the person can experience. And in like manner, as cognitive development unfolds, the individual moves from undifferentiated sense of perception to symbols to language, and this begins to separate fantasy from reality. And it starts to manipulate ideas, first concretely and then abstractly. And so look back at your own childhood. You're going to recognize that each developmental space you occupied was perfectly adequate for you while you were in it. But as you grew and advanced, the prior skill that had been whole and complete all by itself became only a part of the new set of skills. Because you developed, you moved on, you incorporated the old into the new. And crawling was an adequate way of getting around at one time. Imagine if we were still stuck at crawling at age 47. But walking was even more adequate later. And when you shifted from crawling to walking, you embraced a greater capacity. I remember the first time I learned how to ride a bike. I was young. I was 6 or 7. And my neighbors had a bike, and I just got on and boom! Oh, whoa, it works! I got my balance. And I was on my friend's bike, and I was so euphoric about being able to ride his bike, I took off. I went like 12 blocks down the road. Just, I'm riding a bike. I'm riding a bike. And, and I loved it. And I was just in this lost in time euphoria of having gained that new capacity. So much so that his brothers and everybody else came winding up behind me on their bikes going, dude, where'd you go? Turn around, come back. And so I had to, I had to break out of the euphoria of that. I had understood the greater capacity and experienced it for the first time. So growth as an expansion, also, it's an expansion of capacity, isn't limited to human experience, but it's found throughout the whole natural world. First there's particles, then atoms, then molecules, then cells, then organs, then organisms. And the order of the expansion seems to be important since cells, for example, don't have to become parts of organs. But no organ can exist that is not comprised of cells. So growth or development is an expansion in which wholes, W-H-O-L-E-S, whole things, expand to become parts of greater wholes, whose capacities exceed that of the prior whole. Scientists, whole, W-H-O-L-E, in case anybody's confused. There was a scientist, Arthur Kessler, who used the word holon, H-O-L-O-N, to describe these nested wholes, W-H-O-L-E-S. And each level of development contains those that came before it and adds its own capacity to it. And like layers of an onion. Like layers, donkey! Like layers! And each layer of the holonic onion tends to preserve and assert its individuality, such as it is, but at the same time to function as an integrated part of the existing whole, or an evolving whole. So now, if you got all of that, you just had a really basic science lesson right there. If we're to map the holon onion of cells to organisms, it would have... I've got charts that I should have put up today, and I'm sorry I didn't. Those of you on radio, you're just fine because you can't see it anyway. But it goes subatomic particles in the inner onion to atoms, to molecules, to cells, to tissues, to organs, to organisms. That's the cells to organisms holon onion, if you will. If you peel back the layers, this is what you find. And even the concept, the conceptual, if you will, or the man-made creations, such as language and other systems, can be holonic in nature. Everything we're talking about is an artificial creation. It's built upon a series of nested realities from the human culture of shared meanings and symbols. And there's this conceptual creation. Its holon can also be mapped. It's easy to diagram these things. You could do it with a pen and a dinner napkin. And map these things out. The basic unit of a book, for example, is an individual letter. I write books. It starts with a thought. Then you put it into a letter. And now if you broke it down into a physical holon, it would be this idea of a letter. While the whole and complete in themselves, on their own, letters can only convey so much meaning. However, when letters are combined, they form words whose meanings far outstrip that of individual. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing live radio right now. So, to my thousands of listeners, I'll call you back. Yeah, I'll give you to the daughter, your sister. Bye. Sorry, folks. That was my grown-up daughter, who's going to be 28 years old soon, with her twin sister. Talking to my 5-year-old daughter. And my 5-year-old just barged right in and said, hey, say hi to Abby. So there you go. Sorry for the interruption, folks. You heard it as it was happening. Scintillating live radio. All right. And so where was I? I'm talking about how a book is put together. A letter. A bunch of letters. Bunch of letters that are whole and complete in and of themselves, but on their own can only convey so much of a meaning. It's when you structure them and you combine them, they form words whose meanings far outstrip that of individual letters. Letters are the foundational unit, physical unit. This is after the ideas, of course. They're the foundational unit. And they're the center of the onion, so to speak. And words are the next layer. Individual words, although whole and complete in themselves, can also only convey only so much information. When I say the word love, we know what the word means. When you put it in context with other words, with antecedents, and all the other prerequisites around them in a sentence, you can change the whole meaning of love. Love can mean this, but you can then say something like, if you do not have love, you have nothing, XYZ. And it changes what you're trying to express with the singular word, which has its own singular meaning. So pretty academic stuff, elementary stuff. So combined together, phrases and sentences are able to convey blocks of ideas, blocks of concepts that single words can't. Sometimes because I'm a marketing advertising guy most of my life, we try to boil concepts down to one word. You know, I remember doing an ad campaign for this is 25 years ago, an ad campaign for a big heart clinic up in the northern tier of the Twin Cities here. And I started taking pictures of, the photo campaign was to take pictures of a child with a grandfather, a husband with a wife, a mother with a daughter, a grown mother with a grown daughter. And we used one word, things, daughters. And then the explanation under it was, all about taking care of your heart to see your daughters grow. Same with grandparents and grandkids and so on. And so you can take singular ideas and convey them, but with a single word. But of course you have to build on that. Okay, I'm getting off on the academic and the elementary here. So when combined together, all these phrases and sentences really convey whole ideas. But that's not the end of the whole on, as sentences can be combined into paragraphs, and paragraphs into sections and chapters. Put a dozen or more chapters together, and you might be holding a book in your hands. So there's far more information in a book, say, than the letter B all by itself. And that each part of a book comprises of letters, and so on and so forth and so on. So concepts are also holonic in nature. They build from foundational ideas that can expand to hold more and more information or perspectives as the holon grows. This aspect of concepts is very important to understanding how spiritual ideas come to embrace blended paths of interspirituality, in essence. And so many social scientists out there, they believe that human development and faith development also express themselves holonically. And I'm going to look at sequences of personal development that are found in two developmental models here. And we're going to discuss in detail the process as we move on here. The first model discussed is by Don Beck and Christopher Cowan. It's based on the work of their mentor, sociologist Claire Graves, which they call spiral dynamics. Keep that in your head. Spiral dynamics. This model identifies a patterned structure of values that emerge sequentially in both people and cultures. They use the term value memes to describe these cluster of values. And each turn of the spiral is associated with a meme or a collection of values that evolves through the levels of increasing complexity. And these scientists, social scientists, they assign names and colors to these things. I'm trying to look at how to bring this information down good for audio. The value clusters of spiral dynamics include descriptions of the developmental model that are created by different philosophers. Ken Wilber was one of them. Wilber's model is based on research and development of developmental sociologists, and spiritual writers, both East and Western tradition. And you can see his correlations of the various models of development in a series of charts and so on that I don't have pictures of here. But I want to mention that I may try to get these pictures up for tomorrow's show so we can take a look at this. And if this topic's of interest to you, you can look some of this stuff up. You can find a good place to begin. You can look at Pagan Spirituality that was written in 2006. And these ideas constantly change and morph but they're pretty much along the same line. So spiral dynamics and developmental spaces is what we're talking about here. I may have launched into something that's a little tougher to get across just in an audio program like this, but let's keep going. The spiral is a descriptive metaphor for the ways in which people's values grow, change, and expand, and in generally predictable order. I got to leave off at that because I see we've only got about less than a minute left. So I want you to start thinking about these things, how ideas and spirituality concepts grow from the basic, most simplistic part, and they grow and blend like an onion. There's layers to everything. And this is what we're looking at as we're going to start looking at this interconnectivity and the development of interconnectivity and the development of belief, the development of values. And it's like this spiral that we just ended with. And I'll try to have some diagrams to illustrate some of this stuff by tomorrow. And so, folks, we're here. We're at the end of the show. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Kind of left you, I know, on a cliffhanger. You're just dying for the rest of this. Come back tomorrow. 23 hours from now, we'll be back. So you sit tight, and we'll see you here.